right. Hello, everybody. Hey, Paul, Mark, Spartan Warrior Queen. Good to have you here. How's everyone doing? Let's talk geopolitics. Guys, we're going to do, I'll make the announcement later, but we are going to do a call-in show on Monday at the same time as now, which is 1 o'clock LDN time. Correct, Alexander?
Correct. It's 1 o'clock. Absolutely. Yep.
Okay. And we'll do a call-in show then. We're going to do another show like we did last week. Let's talk geopolitics. Let's answer questions from the live stream, from the chat. If you guys want to send us super chats, that's also cool. We'll do about an hour show. What else? That's it. I still have internet issues here, Ote and Nova, and I'm waiting for Cosmote to deliver a new line. If I can't get a new line delivered, Alexander, I'm just going to hop on a plane and, I don't know, go somewhere with really good internet in Europe. So I don't know, what are the countries with really good internet in Europe? Romania, Hungary, Poland. I think they have good connections.
I think they do.
Belarus, but we can't really fly to Belarus, can we?
No, of course not. I mean, that's it's probably because they have good internet connections that we can't fly there. But still,
Greece is just such a freaking mess, man.
I mean,
mess of a country.
Think about it, Alex. I mean, this is supposed to be a dictatorship, Belarus, and they have better internet than the so-called democracies. And it's probably easier and freer and more easy, possible to say and do things on the internet in Belarus, which is a very advanced IT sector, by the way.
Very advanced IT, good crypto sector, good IT sector. I'll say this one: the countries that I've been to that had really good internet was Romania, Poland, Russia. Yeah. Those three countries really stood out. Hungary as well. Yeah. I mean, they really stood out. Just, 10 years ahead of what we have here in Greece.
Absolutely.
That's not an exaggeration.
Yes. I mean, I haven't been to Russia now for some time, but I was certainly well ahead there of what we have in London. At least in Moscow and St. Petersburg, well ahead of what we have in London.
Anyway, so I'm on my mobile data again. And anyway, let's get this show rolling. Spartan Warrior Queen, how are you doing? Good to see you here with us, the best moderator on all the interwebs. Let's see who else is joining us. Nigel is in the house, and Mark is with us. And Denise and Brian opened it up with a €10 super chat. Thank you very much. Guys, just send me your questions on the news. We had a big week in news. Real quick, Alexander, what stories stood out? Obviously, I think Dr. F is the big one. Huge scandal, if not the scandal of the century.
Absolutely. I mean, this is going to become this is enormous and very, very bizarre and very strange and rather ugly, actually. But that is a huge scandal. It's going to have enormous international ramifications also. I mean, it's going to be something that is going to change people's perceptions. It already is. I did a video on my channel about a remarkable article written by a man called Thomas Frank for The Guardian, in which he said that, if everything is as it appears to be, with all these stories about Dr. F, and we didn't actually mention Dr. F, but that's what he was alluding to, then his world will be turned upside down. That was essentially what he was saying. I mean, he will no longer be able to believe anything anymore. So it's going to have a massive effect on the way the world is and how things are. But I think there's that going on. But I think there's all sorts of other important things going on in all sorts of places. First of all, there's the big geopolitical news. And we're now grinding up, in a stuttering, uncertain way towards this summit meeting between Putin and Biden in just over 10 days' time. And it's really remarkable to see how, even as these two countries, Russia and the US, seem to be talking about steps to improve relations, in reality, at least the Russians are busy preparing their defenses as if they know that this doesn't really mean anything. And I was reading a fascinating piece in the Russian media about how it's proved impossible to pin the Americans down to any clear agenda. And by the way, that same article that I read contrasted this with the meeting between Putin and Trump in Helsinki, which it turns out did have a structured agenda. The meeting was far better prepared than this one. And you see comment after comment from Russian officials, from Lavrov, from Medvedev, from Navalny, the head of the central bank, from all sorts of less important Russian officials. A man called Ryabkov has been talking quite a lot. All of them saying, that things are going to get worse, that Russia's going to be preparing for more sanctions. And so this is such a strange summit, the weirdest summit I've ever known. So there's that going on. And of course, around the world, things don't stop. Latin America seems to be swinging left. There's big protests in Colombia. There's been a major election earthquake in Chile. And Ecuador seems to be the exception that proves the rule. But everywhere else, it seems Latin America is swinging left. For example, and that's just one place, one part of the world where all sorts of things are going on.
Yeah, we're heading towards conflict, Alexander.
Absolutely,
that's my take on it. There's no doubt about it. It's going to be a big one. It is going to be a big one. I don't know. That's my feeling. Anyway, all right. Let's take some questions. See what people are talking about. What are you guys interested in? Let's hope that we can answer those questions. We'll try our best. And Mark Hewitt comes in with a 5 GBP super chat, and it says, "Never mind, Dr. F. What about the EU and Barnier's link to the Wuhan lab?" Barnier, that's a first. I wouldn't doubt it.
No, I wouldn't doubt it either at all. And I'm sure lots is going to come out on this that we haven't. But we're only at the start. The big mystery, the really unexplained question. And I saw Matt Taibbi, for example, writing on his Substack pieces now. He said, "Why is this happening? Why are we suddenly being told all of this?" And it's a really good question.
That's what we're saying. No, that's what we're saying. We're saying that.
Well, maybe he follows us. Maybe he's taken it from it. It wouldn't surprise me. But it's actually, when you think about it, it's extremely strange that suddenly we're getting all this information starting to dribble out. And why? What's going on exactly? I mean, there's some kind of he by the way go ahead. He was speculating. You can take it on, you don't have to buy this argument that it's pressure from within the scientific community that's brought this out, that more and more scientists have been getting more and more angry and upset about the way in which Fauci was being protected in this way, and that they've been complaining about this. So who knows? But I mean, we've done programs about this. Maybe there's worries that more leaks are going to come out, but who knows? But it is one of the great mysteries as to why suddenly the dam is cracking on this particular story in this strange way. I mean, I'd love to know what's going on exactly.
We're going to find out.
We're going to find out.
We'll find out what the plan is sooner or later. Tucker Carlson said the same thing. He did an expose on an article written by Vanity Fair, which says the same thing. Basically, the scientific community was completely bought off. They're completely in the pocket of China and other big international institutions like the WHO, and they were pretty much covering up this story as well. Because if this got out that labs were making these types of mistakes, then many scientists all across the world would lose their funding. Fair enough. I can buy that to a certain extent, but
it doesn't explain it all.
BuzzFeed broke this. The same BuzzFeed, the cat meme website that dumped onto the world the Steele dossier.
No, exactly. Yeah.
They're the ones that managed to grab all of Fauci's thousands and thousands of emails. And where the hell were these emails all of this time? How come no one else had these emails? How come aren't these emails government property? If this is not the biggest story to ever hit the United States, this massive pandemic, the world, then these emails, I'm sure, would have been available to the American people and to the entire world when all of this broke. I mean, he's a government employee. This whole thing, BuzzFeed and the Washington Post broke this. Something is up, man.
No, exactly.
Something is so rotten here. I mean, you had CNN breaking the story about Biden, stopping the investigation. CNN, really? Really, CNN? You had Bill Gates thrown under the bus. I mean, his reputation has been completely demolished. And now you have Dr. F. This whole thing stinks really bad.
It does.
Don't get me wrong. I'm glad that these people are
absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, absolutely. I mean, I entirely. Great that we know all this. and fascinating that we do, by the way. But as I said, I would love to know why. I mean, this is one of those mysteries that I just can't penetrate. I mean, my mind can't see a clear explanation. So I can imagine that there's, all sorts of dissident scientists who've been writing to scientific journals, but is that really the reason why all this is coming out? Is this why BuzzFeed is producing all this information now? Is CNN so worried about dissident scientists? I mean, you're kidding me if you think that. I mean, I don't believe that for one microsecond. I'm not sure. I'm not doubting for one moment these people are there, and of course, well, great commendation to them and well done to them. But it's not the real reason why this is coming out. I mean, there is something going on in behind the in the deep innards of the system, which I just haven't understood this at all, because it's so embarrassing and difficult for the administration. The current administration, for one thing. I mean, it's so difficult for the political system as it appears. So why is this happening? And I would just love to know. I would just love to know what the answer is.
All right, let's get into the chat and see what people are saying. Alexander, by the way, guys, Duran shop 10%. Use the code REALNEWS. I'm decked out in stars and stripes today, Alexander, walking around Athens with stars and stripes. All right, there you go. All right, guys, you'll find the codes down below. And of course, Odysee and BitChute and locals, join our locals. We're going to run some promotions on locals. And of course, SuperU, the free speech video platform. You'll find all those links down below. Paul M says, yeah, that's what I'm thinking, Alex. BuzzFeed out of everyone. I smell a big poo. Absolutely. Yinka says, BuzzFeed, despite breaking the news, the associated article they wrote was nauseating. They are still playing defense. Yeah, they're treating Fauci well, Alexander, but I think they've been told to not go after the carcass just yet. Let Fox News and let some other people eat away at Fauci's carcass, and then, like vultures, MSNBC and BuzzFeed and all of them can devour what's left of Dr. F.
I mean, it beggars belief that publishing an article or that kind of information, they didn't understand the enormous damage that they were going to do. So I mean, they can soup it up. They can be nice and kind to him, but ultimately the damage is enormous. And again, what's the agenda being played here? Something is going on, but as I said, I can't figure it out. I generally can't figure it out at the moment.
Lindell says, do you think they're using these email leaks to build a narrative that leads to confrontation between the U.S. and China? There's a lot of chat about war going on.
Yeah, I am sure there is a big element of that. I'm sure there's something there. But in that case, why implicate Dr. F? I mean, why go after him? Why publish all these emails? Why all this thing about other laboratories around the world doing all of this also? What is going on? Because you can frame it and explain it as an anti-Chinese thing, and I accept this. Partly that must be the agenda, but it can't be all of it, because so many other people are being implicated and tarred with this also. So there must be something bigger going on, and I don't quite understand what it is, but no doubt we will find out in due course.
All right, Denise J, thank you for that $10 super chat. And by the way, guys, I'll make the announcement again. On Monday, we will do a call-in show. I don't know how long the call-in show will be. Probably we'll just go straight into call-ins.
Yes.
Right from the get-go for the show. But we are going to do our call-in show on Monday, 1 o'clock London time. London is GMT 0, correct?
Yeah. Correct. Absolutely.
Yes. Yeah. GMT 0 time. That is London time. So that'll be at 1 o'clock London time, 13 o'clock military time. That is when we will do our call-in show on Monday. It's been a while since we've done a call-in show, so we are looking forward to it. And let's see what other questions people have in the live stream. Let's see here. China and Australia. If we defend Taiwan with the USA, they will blow us out of the water. I've been hearing a lot of. I've been reading a lot of articles saying that there is more and more tension between China and Australia with each passing day.
Absolutely,
things are revving up.
Absolutely. Now, and you have to look at both sides, by which I don't mean, we have to look at the rhetoric of both sides, because the Chinese rhetoric towards Australia is becoming absolutely ferocious. The Chinese are furious with Australia. They thought they had a good relationship with Australia. They've gone after Kevin Rudd, by the way, who they thought was a friend. They've really gone after him. And so there's no question about it. The rhetoric between China and Australia is dialing up heavily. And clearly, I mean, one almost gets the sense that the battle lines almost in Asia are being drawn. And it's interesting because countries are starting to take sides. I noticed Vietnam, for example, is now working hard to mend its fences with China. The Chinese Xi Jinping spoke to the president of Vietnam, and they had apparently a friendly chat, and their militaries have been in contact with each other. This is because Vietnam, up to now, has been trying to balance against China and the US, and it's been worried about China for a long time. But anyway, they've decided for the moment, it seems, to go along with China. But other countries seem to be going in the other direction. The Philippines, for example. So you do get a sense of the battle lines, and it's again really rather extraordinary to see how quickly this has happened. Just a few years ago, I mean, well within the time that we were doing videos on the Duran, it was all about trade. It was all entirely a trade dispute between the US and China. And now it's evolved into this epic geopolitical confrontation. And I did a program for my own channel. It's not, I think, up yet, in which, we had Xi Jinping, and, this is all over the Chinese media, having what was in effect a council of war just last week, with his senior officials talking about, how to launch an information campaign around the world to counter America. And I mean, extraordinary stuff. All of this so fast, and very, very, very disturbing, very, very extraordinary. And, we are at the beginning of a new Cold War. That I didn't expect that. I didn't anticipate that a few years ago. That's directly where we're heading.
Cold War, maybe hot war. It reminds me of Lord of the Rings, Return of the King. The armies are preparing. You know what I mean? The lines are being drawn.
Yeah.
Countries are picking their side, and they're preparing.
Yes,
and they're preparing for the confrontation. It's as clear as day. Everything that's going on is in preparation for a big confrontation. I'm going to have your video up, by the way, this afternoon. And we also did a video, which will go up this weekend, about how Russia's preparing by de-dollarization. They're preparing as well. I mean, countries are taking all the steps they need to take in order to prepare for some sort of conflict. I don't know what shape or form that conflict's going to take place. No. Proxy wars, cyber war, I don't know. But there's no doubt that we're heading towards a big confrontation.
Absolutely correct. And as I said, the speed is astonishing. And I'm sorry for countries like Australia that are clearly feeling the heat from all of this.
Yeah. All right. Rainy Steps 549. Super chat, greatest show on earth. Thank you very much, Rainy Steps. QLam says, why would Dr. F and all the so-called deep state members communicate using email and leave incriminating digital evidence? Yeah, Hillary Clinton with her server in the basement.
Yeah, well, the question answers itself, because these people think they're immune. they don't imagine that this information will ever be used against them, because at the end of the day, up to now, they've run the system. That's the fact. I mean, think how long he's been around. I mean, almost all my life as a person who follows the media and these things, he was around during the AIDS affair, during the AIDS pandemic. I can remember him then. This person obviously assumes himself to be untouchable. So of course he uses Gmail. He's not afraid to, because he thinks he can say whatever he likes in private, of course, and it will never come back to bite him. And it must be an absolute shock to him that now it has. And of course, he's going to be called now apparently by Congress to give evidence, which is going to be a very new and difficult experience for him, I suspect. But that's why.
Yeah. From Maria DKK 89 super sticker. Thank you very much, Maria, for that. Brett has just finished watching Putin's speech, St. Petersburg. I also saw a little of it, read some of the comments. He made some comments about how the shots are being used as political weapons. In a nutshell, he was commenting about that, and they are being used as political weapons.
Absolutely. I mean, this is full spectrum confrontation on a scale we've never seen. I mean, I would remind everybody that way back in the 50s and 60s, the United States and the Soviet Union, at the height of the Cold War, the former Cold War, worked together to deal with smallpox. I mean, they did. The Soviets actually proposed that there should be a joint effort to eliminate smallpox. The US agreed, and the two countries joined forces, and they worked together to bring smallpox basically to an end. And that was that Cold War. This Cold War, which we're looking at now, is taking a far more confrontational direction in that respect than the old Cold War ever did. And there were proper lines of communication. There were diplomats. I mean, bear in mind, at this moment in time, as we are speaking, there is no Russian ambassador in Washington, no American ambassador in Moscow. We have to go back to the early 1930s for a situation like that.
It's a train wreck.
It's unbelievable that we've got to this point.
Yeah. All right. Valley S in the house. Hello from Ohio. I didn't get the notice for the live. It's all right, Valley S. It's good to have you here with us. YouTube is, well, they don't treat us with the most of love. But anyway, it's all right. New member. Gudney is a new member. Welcome, Gudney. Thank you, Valley S, for that $20 super chat. Thank you, Anatoly, for that super sticker. And the Rubber Band Man says, gas and food prices are rising here in the U.S. Trump rallies are about to begin. What is going on, guys? What do you see coming?
It's the same here. Can I quickly say? I mean, when I go to my groceries and I buy my groceries here, I notice again that prices are rising, and perhaps more interestingly and perhaps more disturbingly, there are shortages. Things are not appearing as regularly. Food shops are not as fully. Now, of course, obviously, I notice food shops more, but this is a clear sign of inflationary pressures building up. Because, of course, when you have high inflation, then it's not possible to satisfy demands because the prices of goods aren't keeping up with the general rise in prices. So they're not being distributed as efficiently as they would be in a low inflation environment. We're heading for inflation, and we're heading for inflation as a direct product. I've said this before, and I was going to say it again, of the utterly irresponsible policies that are being pursued by the current administration and the US Federal Reserve Board in the middle of a recovery. And the United States was in strong recovery last year, at the end of last year and at the beginning of this year. In the middle of a strong recovery, they have embarked on a massive exercise in fiscal and monetary expansion. This is unprecedented. There is more money going around the system than there are goods to support it. And that's why inflation is rising. And it's going to create many problems. And if it gets out of control, then it's going to create havoc with people's savings. And it's going to cause many, many more problems down the line. It's astonishing to me that this isn't being discussed as much as it should be and isn't being criticized as much as it should be too.
All right. Brave New Perth says Japan and Australia are U.S. client states.
Well, yes, I think that one must be careful to say that, especially in Japan, which is an interesting country with an extraordinary past and in politics, the Japanese have reasons for being deeply suspicious of China. And, I'm not going to go into the history of this. I'm not going to discuss who was right and who was wrong in the 19th century. I mean, Chinese people will say, and I think with very good cause, that China was the victim of a great deal of Japanese aggression in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. But whatever it is, it's left a legacy of suspicion and hostility, and that partly explains Japan's very strong alignment with the US. Australia, of course, is part of the Five Eyes. It's close to Britain. It's part of the Anglophone world. I think it's unrealistic to expect, to be straightforward about it, that a country like Australia, in the case of a dividing lines between Australia and China, is going to choose China over the US. I mean, that just isn't going to happen. So one has to understand also what the motivations of these countries are and why the leaderships of those countries are making the decisions that they are.
All right. Denise J says, where are the statesmen versus these idiots? Where are the statesmen? There are a few, but the US had a great
well, the US,
and then the big guy came along. 10% for the big guy came along, and well, we know the story.
Well, the other abysmal place is Europe. I mean, there is absolutely no one at all in Europe that you can look to and consider to be a person of any significance at all. I mean, Orban has his ideas and his policies, and he's a strong personality, but he doesn't lead a big country, a strong country like Germany or France. And in the absence of such a person, European policy has just become, ludicrous, completely ludicrous. I mean, one of the things about the present day, which we have to be straightforward and frank about, is if you want to look at purposeful leaders, you have to look at Russia and China. I mean, Putin.
Well, the key word is purposeful.
Absolutely.
We're not saying good or bad or purposeful.
I chose my words very carefully.
That's why
very carefully.
You chose a very good word.
Yeah. But I mean, they at least know what they're doing, and they're in control of their policies. But as I said, if you look at the state of the West at the moment, the quality of leadership here is abysmal, and I've never known it so bad.
Trump was a purposeful leader too. Absolutely. Yeah. Europe could change very quickly. It's not all lost. We did a video on Italy, which is going up this weekend, in Meloni from the Brothers Party. She seems like she's very solid. You have Le Pen, who's a possibility. Yeah. I mean, it could change. It could change very quickly. Yeah.
I hope so. And it could change very quickly. But all I'm saying is, at this moment in time, we have not so much an absence of leadership as a sort of anti-leadership. It's a very weird situation. It's people who don't want to be leaders. I mean, I can't explain it exactly, but I've never known anything quite like this in Europe before.
Go ahead.
Yeah, it's as if they have intentionally decided that they're going to be as weak and purposeless and mediocre as possible. I mean, that they would pick someone like Ursula von der Leyen to lead the European Union is really extraordinary in itself.
Can you imagine Meloni taking charge in Italy? Can you imagine Le Pen taking charge in France? But then on the flip side, can you imagine the Green Party coming to power in Germany? We may be seeing Europe, really fragment. Going to two different extremes.
We could indeed. But I will say this, the Greens are losing support in Germany. I was looking at the latest opinion polls, and they've been making some bizarre missteps, like sending one of their leaders to the Ukrainian border where he put on a flak jacket and a helmet. Things of that kind. That didn't go down well with many Green supporters in Germany itself. So they've actually been losing support at the moment. But no, basically, you are right. We are starting to see growing signs of fragmentation. And obviously, if we have this time next year, a situation where there's, Le Pen in France, Meloni in Italy, then of course it's a completely different situation, and good for world peace, by the way.
Yeah, absolutely. From Sparky, having a COOF as man-made accidental leak makes it seem scarier, even though a man-made virus is usually less likely to sustain itself than a natural one. Fauci controversy keeps it in mind.
Well, that's also true. But I mean, again, I just want to stress again, first of all, I'm not a scientist, so I'm not going to get into the science of this. But the fact is, that seems there's an awful lot of this going on around the world, not just in Wuhan, but in all sorts of laboratories in many, many places. And it seems that Dr. F is very, shall we say, involved in all of this, or at least very familiar with all of this. And if this is going on, and remember, it's our tax dollars and pounds and euros and whatever rubles that are paying for all of this stuff, I think we should be told. We should know about it. We should know what the risks are. We should have, democratic consent about these things. All this thing going on in secret like this, in violation of international law, by the way. There are all kinds of conventions that supposedly forbid this kind of activity, as I understand it. Well, this doesn't, well, I was going to say it doesn't inspire confidence, but that's probably the greatest understatement that's ever been said in human history. I mean, it causes enormous alarm.
Yeah, absolutely. Zarael says, I'm still at work. You guys have started. We did, but we're doing the call-in show, Zarael, on Monday. On Monday, we're going to be doing the call-in show at 13 o'clock LDN time. Today, we are just taking questions about all the big news of the week from the live stream and via Super Chat. And while we're on the subject of Super Chats, we have one from Brave New Perth. Is Mahmoud Ahmadinejad planning the next Iranian Islamic revolution? After Khamenei dies, Iran facing drought, economic stagnation, and social disarray.
Well, yes. I mean, this is the great paradox about Iran, because Iran is both at the level of its foreign and diplomatic policies extremely well organized and effective. We've just done a program on the Duran, which I think hasn't come out yet, but will soon, which we say how the Iranians have basically run rings around the Americans on the JCPOA issue. I mean, it's just astonishing to see how cleverly they manage that. And at the same time, when it comes to running their own domestic affairs, it's bewildering to get a sense of how disorganized and chaotic both their political system and their economic management system is. So there is this extraordinary disjunction, and it's a great weakness. And you do have to wonder sometimes about how stable ultimately Iran is. But I'm going to have to say something else, which I think that Ahmadinejad does not come across to me as the kind of person who is going to have the strength, the political support across Iranian society to transform things in any effective way. As I understand it, within pretty much all the important political power brokers, he is very unpopular now. He has a certain amount of support amongst some people, working class people, especially in some of the cities. But the idea that he could lead any kind of transformation of Iran, especially against the political system, I think is inconceivable. If it's going to be done, it's going to have to be done by someone else.
All right. Ilya from Phuket. How you doing, Ilya? Good to have you here. Thank you, Spartan Warrior Queen, for putting the times for the live call show on Monday. Thank you very much. 1:15 London time, Eastern time, US 9:15 a.m., and Pacific time, 6:15 a.m. Thank you very much for that. Spartan Warrior Queen, DKK, you guys have become part of our family. Our day is not fulfilled without you. Thank you for all you are doing. Thank you very much for that. Pamina Benson, DKK 500. Thank you very much for that super chat. From Wade, $5 super chat. Thank you very much, Wade, for that super chat. Valley S wants to know, if Trump was to be reinstated as the official president, what might happen to Biden, in your opinion? That's an interesting question.
Very interesting. I don't know is the short answer. I think
Trump would let him. Trump was nice with Hillary. Let's be honest. He was very, he didn't go after Hillary at all. He was very gracious.
I think a nice retirement home somewhere in rural Delaware is probably what would wait for him. Actually, I mean, I'm sure I think that's right.
I mean, going off of, okay, he had to lock her up and everything there and everything that Hillary Clinton did,
Yeah.
and she went after him hard. But at the end of the day, when Trump became president, he was a very gracious winner. I mean,
Yeah.
let's be honest. He even made a speech and said, "Guys, let's just forget about everything with Hillary Clinton and just let's move forward." The Democrats did not afford him the same.
No. He's not a vengeful man. He's opponent, so.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's a fundamental difference.
Well put. Let's see what else we have here. Let me get a super chat from Sparky, and then I'll go into the live stream and see what the questions are. Sparky says Marine Le Pen in charge of France could save America from the globalists. Viva Le Pen.
Well, I think if she wins the election next year, which is very tough but not impossible, but if she wins, that will be an earthquake. I mean, that will change the world, because of course France is nowadays a small country. I mean, relative to the vast things that go on, it's not like it was in the days of Napoleon and Louis XIV, when it was the world's one of the world's most powerful countries. It's not like that anymore, but it still has enormous traction and cultural significance. So I agree, if Marine Le Pen wins in France, then I mean the European Union will be thrown into crisis, and the world the following day will be different, almost regardless of what she does.
Yeah, I agree with that. Let's see here. Anatoly says, food crisis on the way. Is the bug paste ready? Did you see the CNN anchor actually eating bugs on live TV?
I know.
It's crazy, man. These people are journalists, really? Come on. Oh,
well, I mean, that is entirely a good point, because instead of talking about the real problems, inflation, the supply chain disruptions, all of those things, we have instead people eating bugs. I mean, it tells you so much.
The dollar is a huge story. The USD inflation, de-dollarization is such a big story, and just
I know you say but you don't talk about that. Of course, you talk about well, you eat bugs instead. I mean, this is the kind of media landscape that we have nowadays.
I love it. Elias, Trump was a class act, and right under Elia, Michael says Trump is a eugenicist like the rest of them. The contrast. Thank you guys for participating and watching us. Really great show. Euthanasia says, really great show watching from Australia. Thank you very much for that. Let's see. Will Fauci face the hangman?
No.
No. But boy, did Candace Owens sent out a tweet that was just, I mean, she crushed Fauci, crushed him. She said he needs to be indicted. That's a question that I wanted to ask you. And I had this on my mind, and thank you guys for reminding me. Did Fauci commit perjury, in your opinion? Legally speaking, sticking to the law, do you think he committed perjury?
I think he did, but I'm going to also say something else. I am not objective about Fauci, so I have to say that straight away. I think he did, but I'm going to also say that Fauci's behavior last year, this is before I knew much about him. I have advised ministers in previous jobs I've done. I've had the job of providing technical advice to political leaders and ministers. And I know what the role of an advisor is, of a technical advisor. I mean, I should stress on technical issues, never on, politics. I've never been that kind of thing, but on legal issues, I've given advice. And the way in which Fauci was conducting himself last year so violated, for me, what the proper role of a scientific or technical advisor is, that I still feel deeply offended by it. I mean, I was shocked by it. I just could not believe that he was behaving the way that he was. And a person who acts like that, who basically undermines the person whose job it is to advise It is his job to advise. A person who acts like that, would he stop at a little thing like saying things which are not true? Well, of course not.
Yeah, but can I ask you a follow-up question to that? Okay, Fauci had a political angle, and they put him up to do a lot of these things in order to get rid of the Orange Man. We understand that. So aside from his love of power and the fact that he loved to rule over the US, he had another job, which was to undermine Trump. That's obvious. And he did a good job of it. But in other countries all around the world, including the UK, many of these scientific advisors were all given carte blanche. I mean, they didn't have the task of Fauci, which was to say, we want to also remove the current government. You know, I can speak for Greece or Cyprus. The scientific advisors, their job wasn't to undermine the government, but they were given an extraordinary amount of power. And I mean absolute power. And they were given it by the current government, by the current presidents and prime ministers, by the parliaments, obviously by the media, by big tech. I mean, so Fauci's role in the United States, if you take the Trump factor out, undermining Trump, can you make the argument that it wasn't much different than the role of, say, the UK scientists or any of these guys in Europe, which was really running the country? I mean, they've been running the countries, their respective countries, for the past year.
Well, I think it was different because I don't think you can take the Trump dimension out of it. I mean, at the end of the day, what happened in many countries was that political leaders didn't understand science, weren't able to make decisions, so they delegated an excessive amount of power to their scientific advisors. Some of whom, unfortunately, it went to their head, and they behaved perhaps. They took upon themselves far more than it was their role to do. But in Fauci's case, he wasn't just given power. He was engaging in, I'm going to say it straightforwardly, personal aggrandizement, and was actively operating to undermine and defeat the person who it was his duty to advise. And that is, to me, I mean, it's just beyond the pale. I mean, I've never could have imagined such a thing. It was profoundly shocking. I mean, he was acting like a politician, and that's the only way I can say it, like an opposition politician, even as he was his task was to provide and to arrange impartial scientific advice for the president. Of course, if he didn't agree with the president, if he thought that the president's policies were completely wrong and reckless and stupid and whatever, it's perfectly simple. He could have resigned. He's a wealthy man, for one thing, by now. He could have resigned, and then he would have been free to say what he liked. But he stayed in his role. He exercised all that power. He had all those connections with the industries, with all the people who were making the decisions, and at the same time, he was acting to undermine the person whose job it was and whose duty it was for him to give advice to. And that, for me, is just off the scale.
All right, I'm going to get to a question from Wade on Iran, but going off of that, Alexander, one thing that many people are not reporting on, and here I have to give credit to Stephen Crowder, who grabbed this one from the emails. Their emails from Mark Zuckerberg, personal emails from Mark Zuckerberg to Dr. F. Is that inappropriate?
Well,
is that illegal? A big monopolistic company like Facebook reaching out to Dr. F, a government employee?
Well, I'm not going to say whether it's illegal or not, because I don't know what the law in the United States is. But to me, again, that points very much towards a conflict of interest.
Collusion?
And again, absolutely. Well, if you're an advisor, if your job is to provide impartial advice to the president of the United States, you have to keep all these people at a distance. You're not going to be involved in all of this. This is why I say he was exercising a role which was completely inappropriate. I mean, we have in England this concept of an overmighty subject, somebody who is, completely out of control. He was completely out of control, getting close to people like Zuckerberg, engaging in all these communications and things, keeping things from the president, going into television studios and contradicting the president, even at the same time as he was advising the president. This is just unbelievable stuff. I have never seen or imagined anything like it. And here again, I have to say something. Why didn't Donald Trump just sack this man? I mean, that's what he should have done. I mean, that is what I see. Again, I couldn't understand that. I think had Trump done that on this issue, he would have had a lot of support from Republicans. I mean, there might have been some criticism, but people would have said, well, I mean, this person is completely overstepping his mark. And if he sacked him and put his own people in charge, well, as I said, at that point, Dr. F would have been free to go around the television studios, say whatever he wanted, but at least the administration would have spoken with one voice. And who knows? I mean, in the run-up to the election, we would have known, for example, that all these medications from Pfizer and whatever it is were on the way, and that might have made a difference. I'm not saying it would have done, it might have done. But, had things been run differently, I could see that the political outcomes might have been different. Trump is partly to blame because he didn't have order in his own house. But, of course, the person who's principally to blame is Fauci, who overstepped his position as an advisor to the president, which is ultimately all that he was.
Yeah, Trump could have gone after big tech. He could have sacked Fauci. He could have sacked Christopher Wray. He could have done a lot. He could have gotten rid of Barr. He could have done a lot of things. But, he was advised poorly by many people close to him.
Yeah.
I suspect even people in his own family.
Absolutely,
were advising him poorly.
I think that is exactly
what people like Kushner. I'm not the juniors and his direct family. I think Kushner and much of his group were advising Trump poorly.
Yes.
That's my own hunch, but I don't know.
Yes. Well, I mean, I can imagine. I remember strong leaders. I mean, I remember Margaret Thatcher. I mean, and I didn't always agree with Margaret Thatcher by any means. But would she have tolerated a person like this? Not for 5 minutes. The moment somebody like that appeared in a television studio, he would have been out. He would have been out the moment he left that studio. He'd have been informed. You're no longer in position, and that's what government is. That's the only way government can work.
Yeah. All right. Let's shift gears from Wade. He wants to know, do you think Iran shall have access to the global monetary market? If so, do you think that the real will at least be 42K per one USD? I'm not sure what the rate is with the real.
I know I can't either.
What about the first question, accessing the monetary market?
Well, it's not inconceivable in the sense that we're now seeing the JCPOA is probably coming back, and there's all kinds of agreements to lift sanctions. Apparently, the only thing I would say about that is lifting sanctions once the US has imposed them is something the US finds very difficult to do, and there'll be a lot of opposition in Congress, and I'm far from convinced that will happen. So, no, I don't actually think that it's going to be reintegrated fully in the international financial system. And moreover, I'm starting to question whether the international financial system itself has much future as an international financial system either. I mean, one of the big stories, in fact, perhaps the greatest story of all, is that whereas we had one financial system that brought together the whole world after the end of the Cold War, and which became a major instrument of globalization, we are now shifting increasingly towards two financial systems, and perhaps with the development of blockchain technologies, something completely different altogether. So, we are moving away from all of these things very quickly indeed.
All right, let's go to some of the super chats. Alexander, from Brando Commando, the power car has 4 wheels: China, Russia, the US, and the EU. Unfortunately, the EU is the flat tire.
Brilliant.
Brilliant comment. Yeah.
Brilliant comment, absolutely.
All right, that was great. Let's see. Sparky, now in America, higher education favors those who learn by rote rather than by reason, resulting in people who can't figure their way out of a wet paper bag being in charge. Is it the same elsewhere?
I think it varies. Well, first of all, it's not. I mean, it's straight away. I mean, there are countries where higher education is in a completely different shape. I mean, again, for various reasons, my wife, who is an academic in Britain, regularly visits Russian universities because she's partly a Russianist. I mean, higher education there has been significantly upgraded over the last 10 years and does not work in that way. I mean, it's become much better and it's much, much more like the conventional higher education system that one remembers. But I get to say this, I think in Britain too, for example, higher education is still pretty strong in many disciplines. And I think that's true in some European countries also. I don't think things are as they are in the US to the same extent.
Engine Kid 88 wants to know, why does everyone hate Kushner so much? How does everyone know it was Jared Kushner that gave Trump the bad advice? I don't know. I'm just making a hunch. I don't hate Kushner. I just think he's I think him and Ivanka are very they have a neoliberal tinge to them. You know, they have that neoliberal influence to them. That's my hunch. I'm not saying I'm correct. That could be totally wrong, but that's my guess at it. It could have been Bill Barr. There's articles that said Bill Barr told Trump, if you fire Christopher Wray, I'm gonna leave. So absolutely. I mean, who knows what the influence is? I'm just giving my hunch, and I don't know. And as far as Kushner goes, I just think that he has a lot of neoliberal influence, as does Ivanka. But saying that, someone else in the live stream, Alexander, says, "Well, what's good for Trump to just hire all yes people?" And you can make that argument, isn't it? Good to get different perspectives. That's also true.
You can make that point, but and of course Trump should not have just hired yes people. But what he actually did was something far worse. He hired no people. All the people around him, almost without exception, not, I should stress, in the economic departments where he understood things, I think, much better, being from business, but in foreign, defense, intelligence and security policy, the people that he brought in were people who were diametrically opposed to what he was doing. He had one person who was attuned to his ideas, who was Michael Flynn, and he was maneuvered into getting rid of Flynn. And everybody else, pretty much without exception, Gina Haspel at the CIA, Comey initially at the FBI, and then Christopher Wray, all of these people, without exception, Mattis in the Defense Department, but McMaster, John Bolton, were people who were diametrically hostile to his policies. And they worked overtime to undermine him and to undermine his policies too. So the problem wasn't that he was surrounding himself with yes people. The problem was that he was surrounding himself with no people. And it was very strange. Again, it's because I think he was very inexperienced and ultimately lacking in self-confidence. So he picked people that he was told were good and reliable, but whom he didn't really know. And I
told
think
by rhinos.
Well, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
By people like McConnell, who advised, right?
McConnell and Paul Ryan, remember, who was, speaker, people like that. And I think that was Condoleezza Rice, apparently, at one point. I mean, he was taking advice from people like that. And we saw how it ended. So, I mean, that is the problem. The extraordinary thing is when it came to the Pentagon, one of the most important departments of the government, he only finally brought into position in the Pentagon people that were loyal to him, literally during the transition period, just weeks before Biden became president. And in terms of the intelligence community, he only finally got to grips with the intelligence community. He only brought in people like Radcliffe, just weeks before the election. I mean, he left it disastrously late, and that was the problem.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. God, I was going to say something about Trump. There you go. Obama, no matter how much we like to bash him, you have to give him credit on one thing. And I don't want to say credit. I'll say credit, but it was a sinister move. Obama understood that the best way to weaken Trump was to get Flynn. He understood that.
Oh, yeah.
He's sinister, but he's clever, and he understood how things work in DC, and he knew the best way to hobble Donald Trump is to get Flynn.
Well, absolutely, absolutely, no question. I mean, but Trump also was dangerously over dependent on Flynn. I mean, he needed a broader base of people. He needed to bring in people like Douglas Murray, for example. But he didn't have the confidence to bring. By the way, there are lots of people out there. If you follow international, commentaries, foreign policy commentaries, there were lots of people Trump could have called in. I know some of them who could.
Maybe even Bannon would have been good to have been. I mean, granted, he's controversial. Bannon is controversial, but he's shrewd.
Yeah,
and he knows how DC works.
I know. Well, he had him as political advisor. Of course, it didn't work for very long. And again, the story is, and I don't know how true or not this is, that Kushner and he didn't get on very well, and Kushner won. So, but that was the problem with the Trump administration. It was never really a Trump administration, not in terms of its foreign and security policies. In terms of his economic policies, that was very different. He did get people like Navarro and Mnuchin and those sorts of people who were loyal to him. But in terms of his foreign policy and his intelligence and security policies, he never did. And that was the fundamental weakness of his entire time as president. The people he left in there were not loyal to him, and they spent all their time either plotting to remove him or working to undermine him and to undermine his policies.
All right, we went off on a Trump tangent, but it was fun. Sparky, the Five Eyes defines the global narrative and is key in pushing globalism. Will they eventually fall apart?
Yes, eventually. I mean, everything falls apart in the end. Nothing is ever forever. And if, for what it's worth, I think we're coming towards the point in history when it's beginning to fray. One of the things about the Five Eyes, which shows that it's coming towards its end, is that we all know about it and we're all talking about it. This alliance of intelligence agencies was something that has existed ever since the Second World War. But 20 years ago, you never heard about it. It was never talked about very much. Today, it's talked about all the time. And when something like that is talked about all the time, that means that people know about it and it's become vulnerable. So that's a sign that it's beginning to decay.
All right, I'll read 3 quick comments from the live stream. Alexander from Reckless Abandon says it was Kushner's incomplete security clearance application which let the New York Times discover the Trump Tower meeting.
Yeah.
Good point.
Very good point.
Yeah. Very good point. From Kareem, what's the Russia's response to the recent Turkish drone advances and selling those drones to Poland and Ukraine?
Well, the Russians are absolutely furious about this. There's been a lot of tension between Russia and Turkey at the moment. There was even a story, by the way, that the Russians were either recalling the technicians who were installing the S-400 system in Turkey, or that Erdogan had expelled them. I mean, just about things between Russia and Turkey are holding together. But the Russians were furious about Erdogan's reception of Zelensky in April and the statements that he made, and they made stronger statements about that than they made about anything else where Erdogan is concerned. So this is a very fraying relationship at the moment. Now, when it comes to drones, yes, Turkey has some advanced drones. And by the way, and it's a story that hasn't been widely covered, there has been an incident in Libya of a Turkish drone apparently pursuing a Libyan soldier and perhaps killing him and doing it autonomously without human control. I'm not even sure I fully believe that story. But anyway, it is circulating. But if any country is advanced in developing anti-drone warfare, it is actually Russia. Russia has lots of drones of its own, by the way. And it's now starting to field some very advanced ones. But they're also developing anti-drone warfare, which is both takes the form of electronic warfare to jam signals with drones. And the Russians are widely believed to be the world leaders in electronic warfare. But they're also developing anti-drone weapons that can shoot them down. Drones apparently are difficult to shoot down because they're quite small. And they sort of move around, and they're not easy to track on radars. So, but there are ways to do it, and apparently, the Russians are working hard on doing that.
All right. Valley S wants to know, what about the Iranian warship sinking? It's suspicious. We actually have a video on that. Valley S coming out over the weekend. You want to make a real quick comment about it, but we do have a dedicated video on that incident.
Absolutely. It is extremely suspicious. And my guess is, and it's only a guess, is that it was sabotage. And my guess again is that if it was sabotage, then Israel is most likely responsible. And the head of Mossad, I believe, has actually said that Israel is intending to ramp up its work in Iran. This is because, of course, the United States and Iran are now talking to each other in Vienna, and Iran is talking to Saudi Arabia in Baghdad, and some countries, Israel presumably amongst them, are becoming very nervous about that. And there is this intelligence and covert war that is being fought out across the Middle East between Israel and Iran. And that, I suspect, is going to be the big story in the Middle East over the next decade or so.
All right. Wade wants to know, since China has their own SWIFT system, do you think they shall suture Iran into the SCO?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, this is part of the agenda, I think, which is that, of course, if Iran isn't reintegrated into SWIFT, by the way, Iran also has its own interbank payment and messaging system, and so does Russia. And of course, the point will come, and it will probably come fairly soon, where all these various systems are integrated with each other. And China has its own bank payment system. It's equivalent to Visa and MasterCard, which is Union Pay, and Russia has the Mir card, which is now widely accepted and used in Russia. And I presume before very long, they will both be accepted in Iran too. So yes, I mean, we come back to what we were saying before, that where we had a single international financial system, that's beginning to crack. We're going to have at least two. And I suspect, as I said, with the coming of blockchain technologies, which is only a few years away, I mean, all this is going to be irrelevant anyway, because the kind of financial system we're going to have then is going to be so completely different that it will make all these structures that are created now completely irrelevant.
Yeah. Wade sends us $5 super chat. Thank you very much, Wade. Mark Hewitt wants to know, Cove and Cummings, it seems, is trying to depose Bojo. However, someone told me the person to look out for is Stephen Baker. Stephen or Stephen Baker? I've never heard of.
No, and I'd be a bit suspicious of this. My own person, but first of all, I agree. I think there is a plot. There is an attempt to get rid of Johnson. I think that at the moment he's pretty secure. By the way, one of the most interesting things was after Cummings made all that big, tour de force at the committee meeting, which lasted for 7 hours and which criticized Bojo relentlessly. The result was that the Conservative support rose. I mean, it's partly because, I have to say, the Labour Party, which we've discussed, is in such a mess in Britain that its support is continuing to fall, so that the Conservative government support is still rising. And that, I think, gives Bojo Johnson a measure of political security. I mean, they're not realistically going to depose him now, because why would they want to? But clearly there are people at the top of the Conservative Party who are looking for ways to get leverage Johnson out for all kinds of reasons. I don't think it's Stefan Baker. I'm more like, I have to say, I think the ultimate beneficiary of all this plotting, or intended beneficiary of all this plotting, is Rishi Sunak, who's the Chancellor. But that's my own guess.
All right. Ro Pinto wants to know, does the open letter on Civil War story still have legs?
I have to say this is one I haven't followed, so you have to tell me
I
a bit
think
more.
Raul is talking about the generals, the letter from the generals in the
Oh
United States,
yes,
or maybe
yes,
even the
I
ones in
do.
France.
Indeed, absolutely. I think it does have legs because it does show how deeply fractured Western societies are becoming. I think the United States, I think it's very difficult to see. I still don't quite believe that there's going to be that kind of a crisis in the United States. I think the US military, for example, is both highly disciplined and fully accepting of civilian control. France is different. France has had historically a different relationship to its military than the US has. And I think also the sense of malaise in France is much greater. And I think there you could see things. But I don't think that will happen before the presidential election next year. As I said before, that election is going to be a key event. If Le Pen wins, then I suspect the constitution will recalibrate and things will stabilize. If she loses and policy and general direction continues as today, then I'm afraid you could start to see greater instability, but we will see.
All right. Let me go to the live stream here. Zarael, what are your religious beliefs? Do you have any denominations?
Well, I am an Orthodox Christian.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
Greek
a straightforward
Orthodox.
Greek
Orthodox. Yeah,
Orthodox.
that's a straightforward answer. Yes.
Yeah.
Lego 4366. What's your expectations for the Biden-Putin summit?
Very well. We discussed this right at the beginning of this program. One of the most extraordinary things about this summit is that the Russians, at least, are giving every indication that they have absolutely no expectations of it at all. On the contrary, they expect that they will have this meeting, that things will be a little calmer for a few weeks, months possibly, and then things will continue to deteriorate at an ever faster pace. They are preparing their defenses. I mean, I can't put that more starkly than that. This decision to liquidate their dollar holdings in their national welfare fund is part of their preparations for the sanctions war, which they are convinced is coming. So things are going to just go on getting worse because there is no real momentum towards making them any better. And I think that this summit meeting was partly to get over a problem in Ukraine. I think the US didn't want to see a war in Ukraine in April. I think also there's a strategy by some people in Washington to try and detach Russia from China because of, all countries choosing their sides. I think when the US realizes that's not happening, then we're going to see a renewed offensive against Russia, and the Russians are preparing for it.
Yeah, like I said, guys, we have a show on that, a video on that going up over the weekend. And my big question there, and I'll say it again, I'll ask it to you again, Alexander, and then I'll go into the live stream. We'll take a couple more questions and we'll wrap it up. But my big question to you is, every country, given they were smaller countries, less powerful countries, but every single country that has tried to de-dollarize, once again, I'm not sure if that's a proper word, if I'm using proper English, but every country that has tried it has met the same fate from the United States. What are they going to do to Russia?
Well, I mean, this is the problem because, of course, Russia is completely different. I mean, it's got the world. I think it is actually the world's biggest nuclear arsenal. It's got a very advanced technology. It's self-sufficient economically. It's got a stable macroeconomic situation, and of course, what they will try to do, because of course they will try to put pressure on its borders, but then of course they've got to be careful there because the Russian military is extremely well organized and very strong. So they will try to ramp up the political pressure on Russia at its center. And we're going to see more and more talk. In fact, we're already seeing talk about the importance of supporting what is called Russian civil society. That's always a code word for let's do what we can to engineer a color revolution there. So we're going to see more of that over the next few weeks, months, years. And that's where I think it's going to come. But I think the Russians are well aware of this, and they're taking increasing steps to block that off.
All right, Lubomir, why you didn't cover the Syrian election? We covered it in a
We
video.
did.
Look, I think 3 days ago or 2 days ago.
Absolutely.
Look down
Absolutely.
below, and you'll find that coverage on the Syrian election. Let's see what else. I'm just scrolling through the live stream. Richie the Forky says Russia can fight back, Alex. Yeah. Matt says they got Gaddafi. They get Gaddafi. They got Gaddafi. Yeah.
But Libya,
what they did to
well,
Gaddafi
absolutely,
was brutal.
Was terrible. Was terrible. But Russia isn't Libya. I mean, to say it in its simplest. The Russia is a completely different kind of player, and this is what baffles them. It's somebody said it. It's too big in the end to absorb. And that's the problem. They don't quite know how to get their heads around it. They got very close in the 90s, but it didn't quite work out then. And they were hoping, I think, or at least some people were hoping, that they could break it up. That didn't happen either. On the contrary, seems to have consolidated it. And now they're facing this huge problem, and they don't really have an answer to it. You get people like Sebastian Kurz, who's just made a speech about this, and Macron, who's just also, a few days ago made a speech, both of them saying it isn't working. What are we going to do? But the interesting thing is neither Kurz and certainly not Macron are able to give any answers, because they're not prepared to do those sort of things which would make a fundamental difference. They're not prepared to make the big concessions, because they would have to be pretty big concessions that would change the political and geopolitical climate in Europe in order to sort of get away from this. So they're trapped in a policy of confrontation that isn't getting them anywhere, as they understand.
Yeah. Let's see from Murphy, the game guy. Libya was going to house one of the banks connected to the African Central Bank, and they wanted the first African satellite, so they killed him, in reference to Gaddafi.
Well, absolutely. I think that's entire. I think the more we learn about that war, the more clear it becomes that was what it was all about. And can I just ask? It's a question I've repeatedly asked. What happened to Libya's sovereign wealth fund? It's about $200 billion there.
Everyone asks that, Alexander. We do shows as well, live shows. You get that in the chat too. Whatever happened? Yeah.
Whatever happened?
What do you think happened? I'll throw the question at you. What do you think happened?
Well, I'm pretty sure that all that money ended up in Washington and London and is now being distributed amongst all sorts of people. But it's quite astonishing how officially nothing is ever said about this. It's bizarre. This huge amount of money that was there, because it did have this big sovereign wealth fund, and it's just been seized. I did a video. I did an article at the time in which I was going to make the title of the article that it was a pirate raid on Libya, basically to seize its assets. And then I decided, well, I wouldn't, because that was too provocative. I think that was exactly what it was.
That's exactly what it was. What a tragedy. What a freaking tragedy that was. Anyway, I was going to say that the Democrats run around and talk about equity and everyone's a racist and all these things after what they did to Libya. Anyway, Engine says that Engine Kid says that they've just subscribed to us on Rumble. Yes, you will find the Duran on Rumble. Thank you for subscribing. Lego 4366 says, thank you for answering. This is my first time to interact with you. Well, welcome, Lego. We are happy to have you on board in our community. And crypto is the answer to inflation. Screw the banks. All right, very well. Very well. Anne says, sad what happened to Libya. Yes, it was sad. No You says, yes, France and the US did horrible to Libya. Gaddafi's gold is in Hillari's safe.
Indeed, and let's not forget Britain too. Britain played an absolutely key role in Libya also. So let's
Cameron and Sarkozy that were in Libya giving speeches,
absolutely. I remember at the time, by the way, when the Libyan war happened, and I really felt ill. Actually, I was so shocked and repelled by what was going on at that time.
Yeah. Janet says, I follow you all the time and bought a torch, and my grandsons love it. Thank you very much, Janet. Dylan wants to know thoughts on Australia. We're working on a program for
Yeah,
Australia,
we are.
but 51 cases, and they've shut the whole thing down. We talked about Australia and China, by the way, earlier in the program, Dylan, but 51 cases, Alexander,
Well, I mean,
for Melbourne and Victoria. This is nutty. I mean, it's a sickness.
It is.
I mean, in the mind, to shut down a city of 5 million.
It is becoming completely. I mean, it's out of control. Well, I think you could probably say more than that, actually. But I mean, it is a sickness, definitely, disproportionate, and I wonder how long it can continue for. By the way, very unlike what I've always understood about Australia, which is that I've always understood Australians were a pretty, liberty-loving people, if I could put it like that.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. From Sparky, piracy of Libya messed it up for Africa as a whole.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well said, Sparky. All right, we'll take a couple more questions from the live stream and we'll wrap it up. Thank you, Spartan Warrior Queen, for moderating and for everything that you do. We really appreciate it. So just throw us a few more questions and we'll wrap up this live stream. Brando Commando, Super Chat, says, do you guys think French and Spanish soft power through their languages in developing Africa will curb Chinese influence in the next 50 years? That's a really interesting question.
Yeah, absolutely, and it could be. I mean, this is the thing. I mean, France and Spain in Latin America, but to some extent also in Africa. France, especially in Africa, it has a big historic presence in Africa. Maybe it must be said, not always a happy one. I mean, we're talking about a colonial empire, but I mean, you could imagine France playing a very active role in international affairs, and certainly one which could counter Chinese influence in Africa, in West Africa especially. I remember that in the 1960s and 1970s, when France pursued a goalist foreign policy and made a big play of developing its links with Francophone countries in Africa, it actually acted as a block on Soviet influence. It's just the previous Cold War. But of course, that always presumes that a country like France is acting independently and has a goalless foreign policy. At this moment, it doesn't. At this moment in time, French foreign policy is an extension of the foreign policy of I won't even say the United States, of the globalist network, if you like. And that doesn't hold much attraction to people in Africa at all. At least that's my impression.
All right. ZC Karayani says, I live in Melbourne. We had a 1-week lockdown that's been extended an extra week. Totally nuts yet. I don't even know how to comment on it, how crazy it is. But the people, I mean, when you go along with it, I don't know what to say. I just don't understand why they're doing it. I really don't. I'm trying to figure out why are they being so authoritarian in Melbourne and in Victoria.
Well, we've discussed it before, which is that leaders who are insecure and don't know what to do always reach for authoritarian solutions. And that's, I think, partly the explanation. There may be deeper ones, which we would have to really look. We would look at Australia more deeply, and maybe we could see. But of course, anything that people from Australia want to tell us about it, we would welcome to know.
Yeah. From Wayne 9583 says, is Putin watching for his chance to strike, or is he sitting back and thinking, why would I when the West is destroying itself?
Well, can I just say, I don't know about Putin, but there was a big editorial in Global Times, which I understand was a reproduction from a Chinese editor, an editorial that, the big Chinese newspaper, the People's Daily, had, which is that China says, let's sit back and wait for the West to destroy itself. I don't think that's quite what's happening. I think that certainly the Russians have a clear agenda in Europe, especially Ukraine, and they want to see a solution to Ukraine. And they're saying they're preparing their defenses, and they're preparing for a counterstrike, if you like, which one day they will launch if they don't get the solution in Ukraine and in Belarus and in all these other places that they want to see. So I think that they are biding their time and preparing their defenses. But I don't think it's a purely passive thing. I think they're preparing offensive, or if you like, counteroffensive action of their own. As for China, I'm absolutely sure that they're not just biding their time. The Chinese are also making their moves in the Pacific, and they're doing it all the time. As I said, they've just, it seems, succeeded in working out something with Vietnam, and I'm sure they'll be working with other countries too.
All right, we got one more super chat, and we'll answer a few more questions. Australian politics is insane. That's from Meg. Matt says it's never merely 1 week lockdown if it succeeds to begin with. Lindell says unnecessary. They locked down Perth and Brisbane here in Australia at the start of the year on one case. On one case. And Pete says dictator Dan Andrews of Victoria. Dan Andrews sold out to China. He sold the port. And we have a couple super chats from GEC812. Melbourne craziness partly due to involvement in the strong cities network, Soros, UN, etc. Australia in general due to unrelenting media propaganda. Unrelenting media propaganda. Well, thank you very much for that super chat. Yeah, we're going to have to really take a deep dive into what's going on.
Absolutely.
John Cheeseman says, any thoughts on Nicholas Brock, and do you still believe in the English justice system?
Well, I think the English I haven't got any thoughts on Nicholas Brock because I haven't followed the case closely, but can I just say the English justice system has gone from being, for me, what it was 20 years ago, which is an exemplar. It was one of the best systems in the world, at least at the level of the highest courts, into a much less well-functioning system today. And again, I'm picking my words very carefully because especially there's a friend of mine who is trying to access this at the moment. And I mean, I don't want to say too much, but he's got a case coming up soon in the Supreme Court. So I don't want to say things that might be picked up and might affect that. But I will also say, and this I do know to my own knowledge, that there are still people in the justice system, especially at the very highest levels of the judiciary, who take their work very seriously, who are people of integrity and who do what they can. So I think that it's not the system that I once knew, but it's not a completely hopeless or ruined thing either. So the trajectory is downward, but it's not completely fallen apart yet.
All right. And Diamond Eyes wants to know why no one talks about Canada. Canada is also, Trudeau's just taken a very authoritarian line. And we actually had a caller in one of our last shows, Alexander, who said that he had a friend, I believe it was Alexandre, who said he had a friend in Canada who was telling him about just how off the cliff the country has gone with regards to the COOF and the restrictions and the lockdowns. I mean, completely off the cliff. I've done shows as well talking about their internet censorship bills and their hate speech censorship bills. I mean, things have just fallen off a cliff with regards to Canada as well.
Absolutely. And again, it's unrecognizable from the Canada that I remember. I mean, I should say I've never actually been to Canada. My parents used to visit it regularly, and they loved the country. And of course, they were very involved. I mean, they took an interest in foreign policy. But we remember that time when Canada had an active and utterly positive role in foreign policy and was an exemplar about how a country should be run and could be run. And it's deeply shocking to see all of this happen to a country like that. And it upsets me.
Yeah. Final super chat here from Sanchez. Would you guys say that globalism has crippled Europe to the sidelines as China and Russia continue to rise, and that it's gained a foothold in the U.S., hampering it as well?
Absolutely. I think that sums it up perfectly. I think China and Russia, China has gamed globalism. I mean, they've worked it to their own advantage, and they've done so very, very cleverly. And, that's good for them. I mean, every country should pursue its own interests. But they talk a globalist talk, but they do what they think is in their interests, and they've gamed it very, very well. The Russians almost fell for it in the 90s, but they basically shuffled it off, and they worked harder still in the last 7 years or so to break from it. I get irritated, by the way, by people who say about how Russia's economy has supposedly stagnated over the last 7 years. I think they don't understand what the Russians have been doing over that time to change the entire balance of their economy, to emphasize its productive side and to make it self-sufficient and independent. And we know what a tremendous challenge that has been. But that's what they've been doing. And in my opinion, they're unequivocally now a rising power. Europe is a total mess because it is the place where globalism has been taken to its most extreme point.
Yeah.
I mean, states barely function anymore. And in the United States, I completely agree. I think it's still a mighty power, but it has been weakened because it's now, to a great extent, its politics are controlled by an oligarchical class, which is invested in it. So, I mean, you have a very, I think, it's been the questioner the viewer described it extremely well.
Yeah. All right. No, you says UN and NATO want to control U.S. borders. UA says globalism is the new Tower of Babel, doomed to fail. And Engine Kid 88 says Viva Frey on Rumble and YouTube is a great guy to watch regarding Canada. He is a lawyer turned YouTuber. Yes, and they also have a locals page, Viva Frey and Robert Barnes. I suggest those pages as well. Great pages. Rebel Media is also good for Canada as well. They're on Super U. We are on Super U. We are on locals as well. So look for all of those channels. Those are great resources, and look for our channels there as well. Sparky is going to finish off this live stream with a super chat that says a strength which France has that is absent in the US is it is okay to discuss politics in casual conversation.
Absolutely true. I mean, the French have a tradition of free speech, but can I just say it's true, but even in France, to an extraordinary and alarming degree, that ability, which is still there, is coming under threat in a way that would have once been unimaginable.
Yeah. And Reckless Abandon will finish it off by saying, Tom Lungo says Russia is the best managed country on earth.
I agree.
Comment from Tom.
Yeah, Tom.
You think it's a well-managed country? You
absolutely,
agree?
absolutely. I think so too. Absolutely. By the way, another person who said to me something not entirely dissimilar was Mitch Feinstein, who is no great friend or admirer of Russia, actually, in many ways.
So I'll give you a follow-up to that, and we'll wrap it up from Galaxian. So how does Russia withstand corruption? And we'll wrap it up there. It's a well-managed economy, you say. How does it deal with corruption then? Because in Greece we don't deal with it very well.
We don't. Look, there is a lot of corruption in Russia, but first of all, it's not as extensive as people say it is. And that's the first thing to say. Secondly, the government itself controls large parts of the economy in a way that makes it much more difficult for corruption to function. So to give one example, the military-industrial complex in Russia is controlled by the government. You don't have big companies that lobby and are able to control the parliament and to pay what are essentially bribes to make sure that, ludicrous weapon systems get sold and paid for at vast levels. And they have a very strong political system. That means that, if Putin decides to do something, it generally happens. You can't say that in many countries around the world. So yes, they do have corruption. Undoubtedly they do. It's not as big as the people think. It is a problem. But relative to other countries, they are able to run their affairs in ways that many countries today simply can't. And that's the difference.
Okay, we will leave it there. Michael White says, thank you so much. It has been a great chat. It has been a great chat. Thank you very much, guys, for everything. Thank you, Spartan Warrior Queen. Thank you for all your super chats, all your questions, for all your support. Duran Shop 10%. 10% when you use the code REALNEWS. Look for us on all the other free speech platforms, SuperU, Odysee, BitChute, and look for us on Locals as well. Any final thoughts, Alexander? Remember, guys, Monday we will
Monday
be
it will be
a call-in show. It may be a shorter format call-in show, but we will be doing our call-in show on Monday.
Absolutely. And another wonderful program we've just had, covering a vast range of things. We do need to get on top of Australia, actually. And we mustn't forget what the points that we would discuss the other day, because, of course, outside the West and the China-Russia complex, there is another world. There is Latin America, there's Colombia, there's Chile, which we discussed, there's Haiti, there's Nigeria, there's Africa. We need to start talking more about these programs. And it's a shame that we don't, and we really must. And maybe we shall try and focus over our next couple of weeks on catching up in what's going on in those countries, because they are going to become those countries in the geopolitical world where we start to see countries taking sides. These countries are going to become increasingly important in a geopolitical sense again, just as they used to be in the previous Cold War.
Yeah. Someone says Mali. I think there was an attempted coup in Mali.
And there was indeed. Exactly.
All right, guys, we'll leave it there. Have a great weekend, everybody. Take care of yourselves, and we will be back on Monday. We have a lot of videos going up this weekend, so keep your eye out for those videos. Alexander's channel, link down below. Make sure to subscribe on that channel. If you're not subscribed to the Duran, Alexander, or my channel, or if you're subscribed, make sure to check it, because well,
all sorts of interesting things happen.
Exactly. So look for Alexander's channel, look for my channel, and of course the Duran. Check your subscription. All right, everybody, take care.